What up, citizens of Gotham? Welcome to episode 55 of an ongoing series where we basically take the camera anywhere we want, and we try to find secrets and new discoveries to some of our favorite games. This week we got Michael Chin back, animating the intros. It's good to have you back, man. And if you want to show your thanks to old Michael Chin, you just gotta click the link to his YouTube page in the description down below. But with that said, let's get going. So the first character that I want to look at today is Killer Croc. You see him at the very start of the game and he tells you that he's got your scent, and yeah, it's supposed to be really scary. It does get pretty scary later on, but that's not the point. Point is, you're stuck in an interactive cutscene, and yeah, that's what I choose to call it. But since you're stuck in a certain position, Croc gets carried off into a separate room, and you're not allowed to follow him. You can actually see that Croc hangs there for just a little bit, and then disappears, and then the room disappears right after him. And what's going on here is that the developers are using culling to make the whole environment invisible, because the programming knows that Batman isn't going to be in there, therefore he can't see anything that's in that room, and therefore this is a great opportunity to save on some memory. Now this becomes a little bit tricky when it comes to boundary breaking. See, I actually want to find some hidden rooms, and if you turn them invisible, well, that just makes it a heck of a lot harder now, doesn't it? Like for example, this hallway at the very start of the game, you can see a pre-rendered cutscene of Batman and Joker walking through it, which then leads into an in-game cutscene where you can see just the front of it before the door closes. But after that, the entire hallway gets culled out, and you can only see remnants of what's supposed to be in there. However, if we freeze the game just before the door closes, that whole entire hallway is still there. So now that the game is frozen, we can actually see the entire in-game hallway. And no, unfortunately the outdoors was not rendered whatsoever until you progress further into the game. Outside of the boundaries of the first enemy engagement that Batman encounters is an isolated space that has electrified prisoner jail cells. Now there are jail cells throughout all of Arkham Asylum, and only makes sense, it's an asylum. However, these particular jail cells don't seem to ever be used, or if they are for something that displays on a monitor, Batman himself never reaches these cells. Another odd out-of-bounds environment set piece reveals a checkered cube against a 2D background. Now, I was keeping my eyes peeled for any monitor scenes or cutscenes that might have used this, and unfortunately I wasn't able to spot it. But without a doubt in my mind, this was clearly meant to project a character that's displayed on a TV monitor. And another funny thing about this checkered pattern is that you can find it throughout the entire game of Batman Arkham Asylum. Now, there are several examples of this, and I could waste all of your time showing you every single one, but one of my favorites is the inside of the clock tower. Most of the time you only get a cube or a wall, but in this case, it's lined around the entire clockwork. So we finally made our way outside, and in-game you can actually see Gotham off in the distance. Hey, not too shabby. But I think we can do a little bit better. So if we zoom the camera out, we can actually see all of Gotham up close and personal. First thing you'll notice is Wayne Enterprises with its big W logo. And what's very peculiar here, and you don't often see this in faraway backdrop items, is that nearly all the buildings actually have a back end. Typically, buildings like these have something called backface culling, where since the player's never going to see the back of the building, it simply doesn't exist. But what's really cool is that we have an example of both. The Wayne Enterprises building does have backface culling, while many other buildings in this city skyline don't have that feature. Now you might notice that the ground around those buildings are pitch black. This is actually something that can be seen by the player themselves, and because of its incredibly unusual nature, it's very likely that at one point this ground actually had real textures that a player could see, and at some point in development the developers decided to make it completely black to make it seem more organic. This would be an easy solution to essentially band-aid something that seemed like a good idea at the time, fully implemented it, and then changed their minds. Oh, awesome, we finally get a chance to talk about Don't worry, you didn't miss anything. This is just my way of saying we're at the part of the video where we talk about Scarecrow. So before we get to the really good bits, I wanted to give you a nice zoom out of the one-on-one fights with Scarecrow. See, Arkham Asylum is mostly just asylum walls and sometimes some outdoor environments, so getting a zoom out of something like this is really special, and especially because the camera is very restricted. The game wants you to play this as almost like a 2D segment, but with full control of the camera we can finally see the full scope of this area. Okay, for real this time, let's dissect and analyze Bruce Wayne's disillusion. There's a lot to look at here. One of the things that you'll notice right off the bat is that Bruce Wayne's father is inside this body bag, as well as the other three that are on the table. That's because the way that this works, and it's wicked bizarre, the game wants you to look at your parents and then Scarecrow in a very specific order. And the way that they pull that off is that each time a character's turn is up, they're in all three body bags, or at least how many body bags are left. So when you open the first body bag, Bruce Wayne's father is in all three. Once there's two left, Bruce Wayne's mother is in the other two. And once you pull back curtain number 3, Scarecrow comes out and does his stuff. Now, the game would never allow you to see this, but you can actually see the frame where the body bags are swapped out for another one. We just hit the frame where we picked the body bag for Bruce's mother, and so now the game is getting rid of the other mother body bag and replacing it with the Scarecrow body bag. And for a single frame, Scarecrow's body bag stands straight up on top of the table and then repositions itself to lay proper. And another thing you might notice is that Batman's head is completely missing. I know it looks really ridiculous, but there's a reason for this. This is so that the in-game camera can go into a first-person perspective without Batman's head getting in the way. But the question is, where does Batman's head go? Well, I'm very reminded of a Transformer toy where his head actually collapses inside of his chest, and when the game is done with the first-person mode, Batman's head relocates on top of his shoulders. Really quick, I just want to explain that every single doorway has its own special space to it. Now, the camera always angles itself down so that you never get a chance to look inside, but if we were to freeze the game in the moment when Batman does open the door, you can see that there's a block of interior that's designed specifically for each area that you go into. For some reason, everybody always gets really excited about the Batmobile. And lucky for me, there's actually stuff to talk about here. If we take the camera inside of the Batmobile, we can actually find something that definitely doesn't belong there, which if you look at it closely is actually an overhead light lamp used throughout the game. Now, I initially thought that they probably just use this for when Batman gets a gadget out of the trunk, but that's not the case. In fact, if we freeze the camera while Batman's looking in the trunk, we can see that the trunk itself is a separate model, and that lamp is just sitting right behind it. As you can see in this scene, it's heavily implied that Commissioner Gordon's over off to the right there. Not only does Harley say he's there, but Gordon himself says so in his own voice.
Where's Gordon?
Wouldn't you like to
I'm over
know?
here!
Shut up!
However, if we were to manipulate the camera around and show you what's really going on, turns out that Commissioner Gordon's just another Harley with an elongated neck. Now, I mean, since you can't see him anyway, I guess it could save on memory, but I doubt you need to save memory to pull off this scene, so why don't you just show Commissioner Gordon and have him within Batman's line of view? And then when this cutscene is done with Harley, she does a couple of cartwheels out into the hallway, and then freezes in place, and then goes back into the sitting position that you saw when you first entered the room. A lot of the glass in Batman is used to disguise and hide either small rooms or just basic objects. But for some reason in this one hallway, you can find an array of bottles that are toxic chemicals. Now at one point I actually thought this was Scarecrow's fear toxin. However, this hallway is never used for anything like that. So I was checking out Bane and I found out that a surprising amount of Bane's face actually exists underneath his mask. Now this doesn't usually happen with video games, period. Like for example, Batman himself doesn't really have much of a face at all. But with Bane, there's only very small portions of his face missing, and if we move the camera along, you can see pretty much his entire face. Here's a nice little zoom out of the map that holds the Batcave, and as you can see, it's not connected to the whole island, but rather the one building that Batman jumps off of to get to the Batcave. So this was something that I was really excited about, and I couldn't wait to get to it as a boundary breaker. Oh, that was weird to say out loud. But anyways, it's Ra's al Ghul. I know at one point in the game you can see his body bag with a tag on his toe, and I desperately wanted to take the camera into the body bag to see if there was a full body. And unfortunately there isn't. I was kind of expecting that, but one thing I was not expecting was how hairy Ra's al Ghul's legs are. Seriously, it's okay to have hairy legs, but I don't... Okay. So this is another encounter with Scarecrow, and it's one of the most impressive scenes from Arkham Asylum. As you go down this hallway, you start to see that the regular asylum walls start to transform into an alleyway. Now what's got me curious is how is this pulled off? And by using the camera, I was able to figure out how. Every time the lightning strikes as you walk down this hallway, in that flash of a moment, Batman's transported from one hallway to an adjacent one. And every time the lightning strikes, Batman gets pushed over another hallway. And so in truth, it's not just one hallway that's being transformed, there just exists 4 different versions of the same hallway that Batman gets transported to. Alright, now let's just talk a lot about Killer Croc. Here in this earlier scene, you're supposed to get jump scared by Killer Croc as he smacks on the window and tells you he's gonna eat you again. But one of the cool things here is that you can actually see that he's stuck underground until the game prompts him to spring up and, hey, surprise Batman. But you know what? The surprise on you, Croc. We get to see where he starts off and where he ends up when he leaves the scene.
I will find you. Rip your flesh like paper.
So as for the showdown itself, there's a lot of things to show you of Killer Croc. The first one being is where is Croc at any given time, because you know that if you run around in this area, Croc's gonna just spring up and grab you. Well, what's really surprising is that there's actually a bottom to these sewer tunnels. Not something I really expected since the water itself is opaque. But outside of these tunnels, you will find Killer Croc. He always hangs in this one coordinate, but when the game wants to use him, he'll blip to wherever he needs to go. But how about when Croc actually comes out of the water? Where does he start? Well, actually, for just one frame, half his body's not actually in the sewer. It's bleeding through the actual environment. And then when Killer Croc tackles Batman, you can see for yourself exactly how that looks. And that didn't really seem very fair. Okay, so Killer Croc gets to disappear, but Batman turns into a ragdoll? Yeah, we need to see some sweet justice. So in this scene where Killer Croc croaks, normally you just see him go through the hole and you can't really see exactly where he is in the hole after that point. But if we take the camera down there, we can see that he also ragdolls once he's defeated. So here we are face to face with Clayface. And one of the things that always bugged me when I was playing this game is that you talk to Clayface, you see that he's one person, then you turn the camera and he becomes a completely different person, but you hear the sound effect of him transforming. Very sneaky, as is a lot with the Arkham series. So this is something I actually cannot do with Magic Camera, because the player has to turn the in-game camera in order to trigger the switch. It doesn't mean that it can't be seen, it just means I have to think outside the box. So what I ended up doing here was I changed the field of view to stretch so wide that we tricked the game into thinking that we've moved past the game's point of view. Once we do that, we can see that the character models are just simply swapped. Even if the Quincy Sharp version of Clayface is on the right side of the cell, that version will disappear and the Commissioner Gordon version will appear on the left side. A quick moment to satiate any curiosity here. I had to check inside the cell of the best Batman villain of history, Mr. Freeze, and see if there's anything that we could find inside the cell. But unfortunately, it looks like there's nothing inside. So we're just hanging out here inside this greenhouse and, oh hey, there's the Batjet. No, the Batjet is supposed to appear in this scene. But what's interesting here is that it's queued up in the wrong place, because when Batman activates the beacon to call the Batjet, it swoops in from the left and then smashes into the building, rather than rise up from the bottom and then smash it. Here's the Poison Ivy boss fight. I thought I'd show it off because, as we all know, the plant goes down into a pit that Batman is not allowed to follow, and you can't use the camera to manipulate it to see just how far down it goes. But when we take the camera down there, we can not only see where the plant ends, but we can also see the thorny vines that spring up and spawn enemies. Also interesting to know here, throughout the game, Poison Ivy is perceived as green with glowing eyes, but during this boss fight she has pale skin and still green eyes, but they're not glowing. So before we take on the Joker and end this, we should talk about Quincy Sharp's secret room. Because even though players have probably combed this room from top to bottom, you all probably missed one very important detail, and you're looking at it right now. Can you see it yet? No? Here, let me help you out. Let me zoom in a little bit closer. Can you see it now? Alright, well, if you can't see it at this point, I might as well just slap it in your face. It's this fly over here. Normally, it's incredibly hard to see any detail to these flies because they're moving around so much, and it's also hard to guide the player-controlled camera close enough to ever see them. However, if we freeze the game and move in as close as possible without clipping into them, you can see that these flies are 2D textures, but do share a lot of detail in that texture. So here we are at one of the final scenes before the last battle, and throughout the game you saw TVs with Joker bodies. And of course, the game itself reveals that truth to be that yes, in fact, he is there. But what's a really odd level of dedication and detail is that while Joker is monologuing with the TV on his head, the actual Joker is actually using his lips despite the fact that the player would never be able to see it. Also, while Joker drops the bomb, we can see him disappear as he tries to run back to his throne. Although you can still see a duplicate copy of him on his throne because Batman will end up walking to him at some point. And here's a zoom out of the final boss fight with Titan Joker. And as you can see, much of the asylum is missing because once again, this boss fight has a fixed camera. Gotta say, it's absolutely amazing to cover something like Arkham Asylum. I honestly thought it would never be possible, but I'm glad to be getting it out of the way, and you better believe I'll be covering Arkham City very soon. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching Arkham Asylum. We got Arkham City down the pipeline, too. It's completely viable, so if you are not subscribed already, you definitely should, because we will be covering it very soon. Also, big thank you to Michael Chin for coming back, finally. Oh, man, it's just been too long, man.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. Oh, yeah, we gotta stop this. We gotta stop this. But yeah, thanks, man, for doing the intro this week. If you want, you can subscribe to him. I'll have a link to his channel down below in the video description. And yeah, the big day's coming real soon where I have to decide if I need a full-time job at an office place or if I keep doing this. But if you want to make sure that I keep doing this every single week, you can consider supporting my Patreon if you want. If it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be, though. So,
so depressing. Like Arkham City. Like all that's coming to Arkham.
Pat, is there anything you want to say? Patman?
Get it right the first time.
Ah, there it is. All right, guys. I'll see you next week. Take care.
See you, Internet.